Hey, so short video, not even sure why I'm making it. I was thinking about just thinking about stuff this morning, and if I side glance, by the way, I'm looking at what I'm look like, and I really look better in a tinier little tiny window. Big window, I'm like, need a haircut, could shave. Looking a little rough. But I was thinking about sort of the top five um, sort of RPG books, which, uh, which you know, influenced me or got me to play or inspired me to play. Um, and I thought about it. I'm like, do I even have five? And then the answer was yes, of course you do actually. Um, and so I think and these are in no super particular order. Um, I sort of least first ish in a way, but but who knows? So the first one is definitely Blue Book D&D, the old D&D set, and I remember, so there it is. I don't own this anymore. This is one of those. This is one of those that got sort of swapped out. A friend borrowed it, blah blah blah, moved away, like that kind of thing. I've um I've gained a few books like that and lost a few books like that, and I apologize to everybody from whom I've gained a book like that. But this is one of the ones that I lost with that. But Blue Book D&D, I remember I was in third grade, 1978 maybe, and one of my aunts got this for my father, for a birthday or Christmas or something. Uh, and no one knew what the hell to do with it at all. Um, it had never hit the table. It had never been opened. It was actually sitting underneath. I don't know. We had a little shelfy thing, and it was sitting underneath there, and it's sitting underneath there for weeks and weeks and weeks, months. And I had opened it, and I had looked at it, and it was fascinating to me. And finally, um, my parents pulled it out. They were young, so it was my dad was running the game, my uncle Danny, my mother, and myself. And my uncle Danny was a fighter, if I recall. My mom played a magic user who I will never ever let down the fact that she took read magic as her only spell as a first level wizard. Only spell. Couldn't take sleep. We could take read magic in case there was anything to read after we'd been killed by the shit we could have slept. um, and I was an elf, and through a misreading of the rules, I didn't get my spell, so I was just a crappy fighter. so, so it was us, and in addition to this Blue Book D&D, oops, I just turned my webcam off because I'm a dummy. In addition to this first Blue Book D&D, the module that came with it was B1 Into the Unknown, and man, I remember us trekking through that dungeon. Every damn room was, and B1 was great. It was an introductory module because it literally had the DM go in, and the DM would actually place the encounters. It had a list of encounters and a list of treasures, and it would have the DM place them though, sort of ahead of time. And so there was a little bit of customization, sort of even then. So we trekked in, and we got our torches and our rope. We bought all our stuff with our starting money, and we headed in. Maybe he's a dwarf, my uncle, instead of a fighter. And I can remember. I mean, we did. I remember very little about this. It was a long. It was many years ago, 42-ish years ago. um, but the one thing I do remember is at some point we were walking through and we had mapped the dungeon all super carefully and were, paying attention to what's what. Um, we fell into a pit trap and fell down into the second level totally unprepared and just were just laughing uproariously for minutes at a time, just because for some reason we just thought that was the funniest thing that we had, gone through and mapped this dungeon and tried to make sure that we could get out. And then all of a sudden, we obviously pushed too far that one little bit, and just bam, fall. You're on the second level. You all took damage from the fall. We were all up and alive, but I can remember. Um, the dwarf had maybe 2 hit points left, and I had 4. I got lucky on the hit point roll, and I got lucky falling because I think the dwarf only had a D8 for hit points. Um, the wizard had a D4, and I had a D6, I believe, and I started with 6 hit points. Um, I believe. Don't again, if memory serves. But I had the most hit points left, and I remember, we were desperately trying to get out of the second level, try to find our way back up because that was sort of the trick, right? Um, the danger of falling into that pit trap was just that, was that not only did you take damage, and now you're on a level that you possibly weren't prepared for, but now you had to find your way back out. And, and that's one of the core tensions of early D&D was, can you go in, expend your resources to get to the point where you had enough, you got gold and you got XP, and I actually don't remember if you even got XP for killing stuff back in the day. But more importantly, could you turn around and get back out? And the pit trap lays all of that, into peril because you can't get back out. You don't know your way. So we were laughing. Finally, we sort of got ourselves under control a little bit and opened that, one door, and there was a giant tick, and this was an actual monster in the blue book. And I remember my uncle and my mother hid, and it was essentially me against the tick. But I lucked out, got a couple lucky rolls, killed the dang tick, and that was it. I was hooked, and we never finished that game. Like, I don't know, those 3 characters are still in that second level of the dungeon, still wondering if they're going to escape. And by the way, they probably don't. Spoiler, I bet you they didn't. If we played that out, we would all be dead. But in my mind, those heroes are still in that dungeon, and that was it. And that sort of started everything. But I love B1 Into the Unknown. I mean, obviously, Blue Book D&D probably doesn't hold up super great. Um, but man, it was glorious. It was such, for an 8-year-old kid. Um, you know, I mean, oh, it was great, and you can even see. I don't even know. Maybe this. I think this is B1 behind. Oh, you can't see it because you're not looking at that. You might be able to see it up right here in this guy's picture. Oh God, just the little that blueprint blue color that the early dungeons were printed in. Oh God, love it. And then this picture with the freaking dragon on a pile of we never saw any treasure like this, by the way. Um, Nothing that awesome. But this is just what a great first experience. And that was it. I was hooked. I was done. I pulled this game out. I grabbed a couple friends, and that's how we sort of started with D&D. And then soon afterward, of course, getting exposed to advanced D&D, which was just a revelation, and it was glorious. So that's my first one. Is is Blue Book D&D and B1 Into the Unknown, sort of as a tandem. Definitely one of my first gaming books, and it's the one that sort of got me started. I think my second book, and I have no fancy stuff, so no graphics, not even words. I'm not that clever, um, but I will hold this up. The Traveler book by Mark Miller and GDW Game Designers Workshop, and forgive forgive the state of this book. Um, and when was this book? 1982. So this is a 1982 book. It is essentially, now don't get me wrong, Traveler existed before then in the little books. There was a little black magazine style books. But I think my uncle Danny got me into Traveler after, you know, years later, right? So this is what, 4 years after this Traveler book came out, and this Traveler book was essentially the first three books that they had put out, the first three little books, and it covered character creation with all of the basic character creation and combat and starships and all. Just, it was the basic rules of Traveler. So if you had basic D&D, Traveler book essentially was basic Traveler, and oh my goodness, again, just another book that just totally captured my imagination up through junior high and high school. Um, all the rules for creating planets and creating animals to encounter animals, and rolling up your characters in Traveler was an experience because you could die or you could get promoted. I remember rolling up that first scout and rolling the scout ship when you mustered out of the scout service, and just, that there was definitely a feeling of infinite possibilities. And so we played Traveler a lot through, I think, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade was a lot of Traveler. And we were kids, we did dumb shit. So we had, nuclear grenades and house rules and so on and so forth. But sort of, traipsing through the different star systems and fighting pirates with your little low grade laser on your ship, capturing the pirate ships and salvaging them for parts, uh, going down to the planet, and just another great game. And I don't play Traveler much anymore, obviously. And again, Traveler is one of those systems that holds up okay, I think. I haven't looked at the Mongoose Traveler. I thought I did take a brief look and I should have bought it, even though um, the fifth edition, I think, by Mark Miller, but that was a mess and disappointing for sure, and quite the mess. But I should have bought it anyway, just as a sort of nostalgia grab, I think. Um, for me, but that was, but Traveler is sort of my second love in terms of my early gaming. Um, the third book, and this is a game that we actually did play this. And it's a terrible game, sort of, but it's a great book, and it has a lot of great ideas sort of buried in it. And definitely, these are books that sort of inspired me, inspired games. So it is fantasy wargaming, the highest level of all. And first off, the cover is freaking excellent with that sort of medieval, uh, style of art. Scratching my nose behind the book. There we go. Okay. um, compiled and edited by Bruce Galloway. This was a great book, and half of the book is sort of going over myths and it's sort of a medieval primer for gamers, right? It goes over, sort of a rough Middle Ages, Dark Ages, sort of, uh, all aspects. I mean, it's not a historical treatise by any stretch of the imagination, but um, it's enough to get you started if you wanted to game in the Middle Ages proper. It's certainly enough to just get you started. And and obviously these guys played like D&D and so on and decided, you know what, screw it, we're going to make our own system. It's going to be better than D&D. As many games, you know, at the time were sort of theoretically a D&D but better, right? Um and this system, what I remember was it was super clunky, um, but it had all these cool sort of rules to it that just sort of sparked the imagination, right? You'd be born under a star sign, and that actually affected your stats. So at the beginning, you'd roll, oh, I'm a Sagittarius or I'm a Leo. It had personality traits, so you might have to roll against your greed to avoid a temptation, right? The GM could tempt you to, oh, I'm going to leave my sentry post because I'm going to offer you 100 ducats. Um, sort of cool things that appeared in other games after the fact appeared here. The magic system in this game is at once unworkable and fascinating in that you can build up your own spells. You can, oh, I want to create earth and I want to create a cubic meter of earth and drop it on my enemies. Well, okay, well you're going to have to roll for that, and that is a certain difficulty class of spell. Now, the actual systems to do all that are clunky and convoluted, and are modifier laden and so on. But man, the idea of constructing now, at some point, and all those sort of construct your own spell systems tend to fall apart if they're realistic, quote unquote. I don't know how, but this game had that. Whereas, well, why don't I just create the tiniest sliver of earth inside of your heart, or create an air bubble inside of your bloodstream? Now, you could argue, and the GM could go back and forth on, well, do you know how to do that, or and so on. But I think a lot of those systems fell prone to the, once I figure out the one answer I can let the GM will let me get away with, that is a lowest difficulty that I can manage, then I try that over and over again until someone says, you know what, let's stop him from doing that. But there's a lot of that. But that game, with all the GM advice in the front and the medieval sort of history and the rules for mass combat. There's rules for mass combat in this game. There's rules for challenging the leader of your party, your warband. There's rules for creating your own magic spells. The religious rules were also sort of genius, and again, not super workable, and certainly not modern by any stretch. I mean, this game was, let's see, where it was, and again, it's not like I'm. You can tell this is not a practiced video. 1984 was the second printing. Um, it is 1982. Maybe that was the first printing. Um, chapter frontispieces, copyright 1981. There you go. But again, thank you, Bruce Galloway. This book was awesome. I read this. I think I read this thing probably dozens of times in my gaming career, and every so often I still go back to it. I love the magic system. I love the religious system where you have, you can saints or angels or God to intercede for you. Um, there's a sin and piety system. Um, it's a great book. You might never play any of the rules, and certainly I don't think any of this sort of appeals to the modern gaming sensibility of 2021. But having said that, oh, great book. I would read that. I'm going to read that book again. Um, as soon as we switch games here with my own gaming group. So, what's the Fourth guy on the list, and let's go back to the display capture. It is Hero System. This is the Champions book. This is fourth edition Champions. It is Hero System. Um, I don't own that book anymore. My copy fell apart. I do have the fifth edition revised, and this, by the way, is also my home defense system. I don't own any. I might not own any weapons, but I own the fifth edition Champions book, and I will hit you with this book. It weighs probably more than a couple of my kids. But yeah, so, and I don't love this book. I don't love this one. This is the fifth edition. I think it is a little, and as you can see, it is 570 some odd pages. It's a lot of book. Not all of it's rules, but a lot of it is rules. The fourth edition book was much slimmer, and I think did a better job at sort of giving you the essence of Champions in the Hero System without being. It was it was probably half that thickness, is my guess. I don't know. I'll be totally honest, and I'm not even going to look it up because I'm lazy. The art was awesome in this book, and awesome on the cover. The art inside was okay, but the cover art was glorious. And I think this book captures, in my mind, the essence of Hero System. Now, the fifth edition has some good stuff in it, and the sixth edition has some good stuff in it that does improve maybe on this formula a tiny bit. But having said that, if I were to play Hero again, I would look for this book and I would get this book because I think this book sort of captures Hero System the best and in the least amount of pages. It's the zenith of minimum page count and maximum rules awesomeness and so on. And so once we played a lot of first edition D&D when I was a kid growing up throughout high school. At some point, we made a switch over to Hero System, and we were playing Hero System Champions 3rd Edition, Fantasy Hero 3rd Edition, Justice Incorporated, Espionage, which became Danger International, and we played a lot of that in my high school days. And then this game came out I have no flippin' idea, by the way. I think I remember it when I was in college. I don't actually remember it in high school. I'd have to look up the exact date of when 4th edition was published. But does it have it on Board Game Geek? It probably does. 1989. So yeah, I was in college when this guy was published, and like I said, we played a lot of 3rd edition, but we stuck on 4th edition for quite a long time. And I love Hero System. I love this edition of Champions. I remember coming home for summers in college and playing tons of Champions with my buds who, we used to play first edition D&D. And at some point we had moved away from D&D, right? I was, oh, well, D&D, that is a inferior game and whatever. When I was 19, I was young enough to have those stupid opinions about about RPGs. But yeah, Champions 4th edition, great game. Played it for a decade, easy, and at some point that actually encouraged me to write my own games and get out. Once we had driven a Hero System into the dust over the course of whatever a decade of play, to start writing my own crap, and ultimately I did. But that was my 4th book, probably. And if there is an order, I don't know what the order is for those past 4 books. They are all great books, and I love them. This is the top book, though, and you will have to excuse the condition. And it is simply the AD&D First Edition Dungeon Master's Guide, Gary Gygax, of course. uh, I find this book, and one of the criteria for being on this list for me is simply a book that, regardless of what game I'm playing or what I'm doing or what state of gaming I'm in, like right now, I'm we're arguably playing Hero System Pulp's game with superpowers, but they're literally, I'm not following any of the rules. It is a free form game which roughly looks like Hero but has nothing to do with it, and it's a soap opera with 3d6 is pretty much what it is. Um, but so you might think, well, that doesn't have a lot to do with D&D, and the answer is nope, has nothing to do with D&D, and not first edition D&D for sure. But having said that, I think no matter what state I'm in or what gaming frame of mind I'm in, I could pick this book up and read, especially that there's just sections in here, about approach, even the first, like page 9, the first page, introduction. I love reading Gary Gygax's sort of goofy, articulate, long-winded prose. I love, I mean, this was obviously just a great time for the hobby and a great time for D&D. 1979 TSR game. So just when I was playing D&D, these books started to come out, and and they didn't come out at the same time. So I think the Player's Handbook, or at least, I don't know, maybe it was just my game store. I think the Player's Handbook came out first, and we bought that, and we didn't quite know how to play, so we sort of just munged it all together because we didn't have all the books. I think this one came out slightly afterward, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But I can pick that book up and I can grab it. I can open it up and go, I'm just reading some Gary Gygax's mental state on gaming. And it is wonderful. And no matter what I'm doing, there's advice in there for running your game. There's rules for D&D. There's rules for building strongholds. There's rules for creating random dungeons. Um, and you might not use any of them. There's rules for random tables on NPC personalities. There's how many miles a day you can move. There's there's rules for 20 insanity conditions that your characters might have. Henchmen, right? It's just this mishmash of things, and sometimes as a GM, that's what you're looking for is just, I'm out of ideas today. Give me a table. let me generate some thoughts and spark the process to write an adventure. That's my go-to book for that, and it's a great book, and it's written in such a way, and don't get me wrong, again, modern sensibilities have changed, but I could read this book all day, and I could not care less about fifth edition. I love fifth edition, but reading the book is boring. Pathfinder, boring book. Like, they're not exciting books to read. They just in and of themselves don't spark the imagination. Now, my wild guess is there's something about my 50-year-old brain, and I'm simply reliving this. Right? They say that you like the music you liked when you were 14. I think, don't get me wrong, I think the same is true a little bit of gaming and media in general. You consumed things when your brain was pliable, and now you're in that state. So, a 14-year-old today and me 14, I've been programmed to love Gary Gygax's prose. I could, maybe that's not true, but I love that book, and that's sort of my top go-to game book when I am sort of thinking about games to play or games to run. That's the guy. And so Blue Book D&D and B1 because it started it all. A Traveler book because it's essentially a wonderful encapsulation of a great game. Again, early gaming. Fantasy Wargaming by Bruce Galloway, just for all the little tidbits and all of the, maybe dubious execution. It certainly was great at the time, but today we would probably say, wow, that game's not executed well. But everything in there, there's so much in there that's great, though. Hero, fourth edition, would be my go-to Hero edition, and of course, the DM's Guide from Gary Gygax. That first edition AD&D was simply a brilliant book. Still to this day is a brilliant book. If you can, and there's cheap. You can probably go to a game store or a thrift store. You find one, pick it up, and flip through it, and it's just a wonderful book for GM. So that's it. There's my five gaming books, and I wasted a half hour of your time. Thanks. Talk to you.